This is the story of a closed door, a revoked security pass, and the exact moment Queen Camilla realized her crown does not grant her absolute power. In less than 24 hours, the carefully constructed illusion of Camilla's untouchable authority within the eye, royal family was quietly and ruthlessly dismantled at the gates of Royal Ascot. What Queen Camilla just realized behind closed doors is that a title is merely a constitutional courtesy, but true institutional power is forged in bloodline public loyalty and silent administrative control. By the end of this breakdown, you will understand the exact mechanics of the silent coup that recently unfolded within the walls of the palace. We will unpack the secret administrative power grab Camilla attempted during a period of acute institutional vulnerability, the precise moment Prince William and Princess Anne uncovered the paper trail, and the ruthless, quiet retaliation that delivered the ultimate realization that she actually owns nothing. This is not a story about loud family arguments, but about the weaponization of administrative protocol, where a visual humiliation carries devastating deeper meaning. To understand why this specific internal clash reached a boiling point, we must first step back and recognize the staggering 30-year manipulation that brought Camilla to this point. For 3 decades, she played the longest, most meticulous game of reputational rehabilitation in modern history. She survived the bitter fallout of the 1990s, survived the tragic shadow of Princess Diana, and systematically worked to soften the public memory of her past. Camilla operated under the fundamental belief that she had Charles completely controlled, and for a long time she did. When she was officially crowned queen, dropping the consort caveat entirely, she believed she had finally won. She believed that the title was an impenetrable shield operating under the illusion of absolute power. But the fatal flaw in Camilla's architecture of power is that it is entirely dependent on a single man's heartbeat. She built an empire on borrowed land. That borrowed land became a battlefield during the preparation for Royal Ascot, an event that represents the absolute pinnacle of British high society and sovereign tradition. The royal box at Ascot is not just a collection of premium seats, it is a sacred institutional enclave, historically guarded with ferocious scrutiny by the late Queen Elizabeth II. It is a visual proclamation of who belongs to the true inner circle of the monarchy. What appears to be true, according to internal palace leaks, is that Camilla attempted to execute an act of silent institutional erasure by utilizing a quiet administrative maneuver. Behind the scenes, her private office submitted an updated protocol registry attempting to grant permanent official royal box access credentials and sovereign badges to her own non-royal children and extended family. This was a highly sophisticated attempt to blur the lines between the House of Windsor and the Parker Bowles lineage. Camilla wanted to use the immense glittering prestige of Ascot to elevate her own family into pseudo-royal status, cementing their presence in the ultimate sanctuary of the aristocracy. She assumed she could quietly push these protocol updates through the palace bureaucracy while the public focus was directed elsewhere. She believed the staff would comply in silence, and that Prince William would simply absorb the encroachment to avoid a public scene. She severely underestimated the quiet vigilance of the palace's true guardians. The discovery of this secret plan did not happen through an open confrontation, but through a routine audit of the state enclosure guest lists. Princess Anne, possessing the fierce, unyielding institutional memory of the crown, noticed unexplained adjustments to the security clearance levels for the royal enclosure. When Anne cross-referenced these changes with Prince William's administrative team, the reality was immediate and chilling. This was not a simple misunderstanding of protocol, but a calculated, quiet encroachment upon the sovereign rights of the next generation. Camilla was attempting to weaponize her temporary title to distribute the ultimate symbols of royal legitimacy to individuals who carry no royal blood. The response from the future king and the Princess Royal was executed with a cold forensic precision that used the very weight of institutional protocol as a weapon. Prince William did not engage in a messy, undignified shouting match, nor did he leak angry statements to the tabloid press. Instead, he utilized the silent execution of revenge. William quietly activated a strict binding administrative update regarding state-sponsored enclosures, effectively dictating that entry into the ultimate sovereign zones requires the joint approval of the reigning monarch and the heir apparent. The execution of this silent retaliation was breathtaking in its subtlety, resulting in an absolute visual humiliation for the Queen. When Camilla's family arrived at the secure checkpoint for the royal enclosure, They did not find a welcoming committee. Instead, they hit an invisible, impenetrable wall of administrative protocol. The security staff, operating under direct orders from William's estate, politely but firmly informed them that their temporary passes had been restricted and their access to the main royal box was denied. They were quietly directed toward a secondary, lower-tier viewing area, forced to enter through a side door typically reserved for high-ranking corporate sponsors rather than the sovereign bloodline. What looked like a routine security update was actually a total dismantling of Camilla's social empire. The message was entirely unspoken but completely devastating. By overriding Camilla's arrangements in front of the palace staff and security details, Prince William exposed the ultimate truth of the modern monarchy. Camilla may wear the crown, but William controls the gates. The staff, recognizing where the actual enduring power of the institution lies, moved immediately to enforce the restriction. As the reality of the blocked access and the public sidelining of her family set in, Camilla experienced a wave of cold, suffocating panic. Stripped of her illusion of absolute control and publicly disciplined by her stepson, she realized the trap had snapped shut. Her administrative trick had not only failed, but it had permanently shifted the internal power dynamic. Terrified by the sudden collapse of her authority, Camilla retreated to the one remaining card she had left to play. She went directly to King Charles, presenting the restricted itinerary and demanding that he use his supreme sovereign power to crush William's administrative blockade. The entire future of the internal royal hierarchy hung in the heavy, suffocating silence of the room, waiting for the king's response. When Camilla stood in the quiet sanctuary of the king's study, demanding that Charles use the absolute power of the sovereign to crush William's administrative blockade, she expected immediate compliance. For 30 years, Charles had been her ultimate shield. He had fought his mother, his advisors, the British press, and his own children to force Camilla's acceptance into the royal fold. He had spent decades burning through his own political capital and public goodwill to protect her from the consequences of their history. Camilla fully expected that in this moment of acute administrative humiliation, Charles would summon Prince William and deliver a crushing reprimand. She expected the king to remind his heir that Camilla was the queen, and that her word was absolute law within the private walls of the monarchy. But she encountered something far more terrifying than anger. She encountered a devastating silence. What appears to be true, according to those familiar with the internal dynamics of the king's household, is that Charles simply refused to intervene. He did not yell. He did not defend his wife. He sat in the suffocating quiet of his office and did absolutely nothing. This was the psychological climax of Camilla's decades-long campaign for power. And it ended not with a grand declaration, but with a freezing realization. Charles is no longer the rebel Prince of Wales fighting for his mistreated lover. He is the king. And as the monarch facing his own profound vulnerabilities and the fragile state of his reign, his primary overriding duty is the survival of the crown. Charles knows with forensic clarity that William and Catherine are the absolute bedrock of the modern monarchy. They hold the public's affection, they generate the positive global press, and they represent the unbroken legitimate bloodline. To attack William over a seating protocol at Royal Ascot would be an act of institutional suicide. Charles chose the survival of the institution over the fragility of his wife's ego. In that singular moment of silence, Camilla learned the hardest lesson of her royal life. The king will no longer save her from the Prince of Wales. To understand why this administrative lockout is so permanently catastrophic for Camilla, we must examine the staggering reality hiding behind her royal title. The public sees a queen riding in gilded carriages, draped in historic diamonds, and waving from the balcony of Buckingham Palace. But behind closed doors, the forensic financial architecture of the firm tells a remarkably different story. Her secret maneuvering in the weeks prior was never just about vanity. It was a frantic, calculated attempt to secure a permanent financial and structural foothold before her ultimate protector was gone. She knew that without King Charles, she would instantly become a guest in a house owned by a man who has spent his entire life quietly mourning the mother she replaced. That detail matters immensely because it exposes the ultimate leverage in this silent war. Prince William is not just the heir to the throne, he is the landlord. He owns the Duchy of Cornwall, the billion-dollar real estate empire that funds the monarchy's private endeavours and operational costs. Even King Charles's beloved private residence Highgrove House, the very estate where he and Camilla cultivated their decades-long affair, is legally owned by the Duchy of Cornwall. The king literally has to pay rent to Prince William to live in his own favourite home. Camilla possesses no independent constitutional funding and no vast ancestral properties of her own to fall back on. By executing this strict protocol block at Royal Ascot, William cleanly legally and permanently severed Camilla's illusion of authority over the royal assets. He reminded her that the wealth and prestige of the crown belong exclusively to the bloodline, and that she is entirely at the mercy of his administrative goodwill. As Camilla's shadow empire was quietly dismantled at the gates of Ascot, the physical space within the palace began to immediately reflect the new order. What viewers and royal analysts have noticed in the days following this internal crisis is a profound, subtle shift in how protocol is being weaponized. The consequences of this administrative blockade extend far beyond a collection of premium seats. There has been a noticeable change in access across all royal residences. Reports suggest that security clearances for Camilla's extended family and private staff, once freely dictated by her own office, are now strictly regulated. The privilege of utilizing sovereign properties for private parka bowls, gatherings, or accessing the royal fleet of vehicles has been quietly restricted, routed through a grueling approval process managed entirely by William and Catherine's administrative teams. This is how the royal family wages war. It is not fought with shouting matches in the drawing room or messy tabloid leaks. It is fought with locked doors, revoked security clearances, and polite administrative rejections that gently but firmly push the target toward the exit. Amidst this silent institutional reckoning, the presence of the Princess of Wales has become the ultimate undeniable contrast. Catherine did not need to scream, and she did not need to issue petty demands. She simply allowed the massive quiet weight of the institution to protect her rightful place. While Camilla scrambled in commercial desperation to elevate her non-royal lineage, Catherine emerged as a portrait of freezing aristocratic restraint. In a deeply symbolic move observed shortly after the Ascot incident, the palace authorized the restoration of several subtle but unmistakable markers of Catherine's ascending authority. Specific heirlooms and protocols long associated with Princess Diana have been brought back into active rotation, serving as a permanent visual boundary that Camilla is no longer permitted to cross. Catherine demonstrated that uncomplaining sacrifice, fierce protection of the bloodline, and steadfast loyalty to the crown will always outmaneuver unchecked ambition. She does not need to fight Camilla for dominance because her husband has already engineered the ultimate checkmate. This brings us to the deeper, tragic meaning of this entire crisis. Camilla spent 30 years carefully clawing her way to the very top of the British social hierarchy. She endured intense public hatred, she orchestrated a masterful public relations rehabilitation, and she successfully convinced Charles to place the highest crown in the land upon her head. She believed that reaching the summit meant she would finally be safe, that she could secure her family's future and erase the spectre of the past once and for all. But what this story encoding the closed gates of Royal Ascot numbers, among its truths is that the crown on Camilla's head is entirely hollow. She is surrounded by the trappings of unimaginable power. Yet she is paralyzed by the commercial reality that she is merely a temporary tenant in William's empire. She played a 30-year game of chess, sacrificing everything for the ultimate title, only to realize too late that the Prince and Princess of Wales own the board. Camilla is now trapped in a gilded cage of her own making, sitting next to a king who will no longer defend her, walled off from the royal future and forced to live under the absolute unyielding authority of the next generation. If you want to continue unpacking the silent warfare, the hidden administrative maneuvers, and the psychological power dynamics of the modern British monarchy, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We will continue to pull back the curtain on the illusions of power, one subtle detail at a time. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next analysis.